I don't know where I would be without music. It's very hard to say because as a kid, I just didn't have the passion. It was the right key to sort of unlock a lot of enthusiasm in me that you can draw on in other parts of your life. We have to invest in all the keys, right? So the kids can try them out and see which one sort of unlocks those doors to the enthusiasm and the passion that they can then draw on in whatever it is that they choose to do.
You are listening to Notables, an education through music podcast. As always, I'm your host, Noah, and my guest is Ben Hayes. Ben is a vice president at Goldman Sachs and part of their legal team. But before he went to law school, he completed 4 tours with the Cadets Drum and Bugle Corps and toured with Blast, the Broadway show, on its US and Japanese tours in 2012 and at the 2012 World Expo in South Korea. Ben, thanks so much for joining me today.
Of course, I'm thrilled to be here. Thrilled to be participating in ETM's mission, and I'm thrilled to speak about ETM on any chance I get.
So the show's called Notables. The whole idea is to speak with people to find out how their early musical experiences and music education influenced their career trajectories. So the first question I always ask is, how and when did you become a musician?
Sure. Well, I picked up music. I think like a lot of people, just sort of in middle school. Um, I sort of opted for band, right? Why I chose band over choir or art, which I think were sort of like the 3 options there, um, is is very hard to say. Probably just because my older siblings, honestly, had done band.
Hmm.
I had taken piano lessons when I was a little bit younger than that too. But it's a funny question when you say, how did you sort of get into music or become a musician? Because I was so bad at it. I was awful in middle school. In retrospect, when I look back, I think that reading music is something that came very easy to me as a kid. I think it comes easier, way much easier to kids than adults.
Hmm.
But honestly, I was such a goofball in middle school. I had my friends with me in band, and we didn't take it seriously at all. I picked the French horn. I remember in 6th grade, um, for basically no reason other than I think I thought it looked cool, and maybe it sort of looked unique. But then I actually I switched from French horn to saxophone in 8th grade because we got a new teacher.
Hmm.
Our teacher who had been there forever retired, and a new teacher straight out of college came, and me and all my friends played saxophone, and we basically thought she won't notice if you just start playing saxophone, so you can sit with us, um, right? And but at that point, if you're in 8th grade, you should have some very basic confidence in the
Right.
saxophone, and I had none whatsoever. I couldn't even make a sound. I think maybe she just let it go, but there's no way she didn't notice.
Yeah.
But that just sort of is indicative of kind of like how seriously we were taking it back then. I decided to pick up the trumpet and teach myself how to play trumpet in the summer before 9th grade. And the reason was I really wanted to be in the marching band in high school.
Hmm.
And I had this idea that if you're in the marching band, you have to play trumpet. And I don't know where that idea came from, but like, look, I didn't have a lot of guidance right here. I was just sort of making these decisions.
Yeah.
Um, and something in my brain was just like, okay, marching band means trumpet. And I actually, I remember sitting in the upstairs room at my mother's house, like teaching myself how to play the trumpet on this um, standards of excellence book, right? Which is like this book where I think that's what it was called, but it has like hot cross buns in it, right? And it's like that, with for trumpet, it's teaching you like one, one, two, on the scales and these things. And then I just sort of started doing the marching band, and honestly, that's sort of where I found like community in high school. I would say, beyond my kind of goofball friends. I think, high school is where people start sort of transitioning into, right, their things, right? So sometimes when I meet people who have kids, especially if they're like teenagers, I'm like, oh, so what is their like thing, right? Because a lot of times kids have things,
Yeah.
sports or theater or whatever. That is really how I first became, right, really interested in music, or I would say like interested in being a musician seriously, because in high school is, when I really started drilling down on the idea, just because it sort of felt like my thing, right?
Mm.
I did a number of things, in high school. Like I was a fine enough like baseball player at the time, but it really had a lot to do with my teachers, right? Which I think is your next question,
Yeah.
that brought me into music, other than just sort of stumbling around and stumbling into it.
Yeah, so you queued that up perfectly. Tell me about some of these teachers who helped you to sort of internalize musician as one of your defining characteristics or traits.
Yeah. So honestly, there have been like so many teachers I had along the way. Dr. Paul Neby, Dr. Rex Richardson, who were my professors in college. Gino Cipriani and Sean Farilla were teachers at the Cadets, where I marched for 4 summers. John Dirth at UVA, and I also studied with him a little bit, like in high school. But I have to say, it's impossible sort of to overstate how good my high school band director was.
Mm,
I think lots of people are lucky enough to have teachers like this, but the thing is, he really, really cared, and I think he really genuinely thought it was fun to do well, right, and to make music well, and also to be creative, like go outside the, perhaps draw outside the lines a little bit. And he was just really fun, and he was really funny, but at the same time, he did take it very seriously. And looking back, I really think it was that time that really sort of instilled a notion, right, or a belief that it's okay, and quite normal to be nerdy, you know, about music, for lack of a better term,
yeah.
to be a nerd about it, or to be a nerd about anything really, but to take it seriously and also have fun with it. But on the flip side, not just to go through the motions about something, right? Like if you're spending your time and your energy doing something, showing up before school starts to do marching band practice, right? You might as well put the effort in, right? That was sort of the lessons. One of the lessons I thought that he really imparted, that I think had a big impact on me. No shade to my math teachers, right?
Yeah.
But I was terrible at math, and I was just going through the motions, right?
Mm,
And I went through the motions with it in high school, and you check the boxes and stuff. But I really did sort of excel with music in high school. I was encouraged to do it, and yeah, I took it very seriously. And it had a lot to do with my teach with the teacher. I've heard people talk about, perhaps like their language teachers like this, definitely their arts teachers, their choir teachers, theater teachers, and things like that. But for me, it's like, wow, I wonder if I had had a Mr. Greg Thomas in math, would I be like an Albert Einstein now? Or not that I'm the Albert Einstein of music, right? But I just, he really taught me to take it seriously, but also to have a great time, which I think is a very valuable sort of perspective to have. And the other thing is, he really surrounded himself, I would say, with really, really fantastic people as well. There was a teacher named Mr. Jennings, who was a choir teacher at another school, a middle school, I think, but he had performed with the cadets in the 1990s, and so he was helping teach the marching band. But he really inspired kids in a way that's like impossible even to articulate. When you're a teenager and you're a high school kid and it's happening to you, you don't really notice what's the value of these teachers, probably because it's impossible to like judge them against the other teachers, but or you don't have a really anything to reference. But then if I would go back and I would see perhaps like a rehearsal a few years later just to visit, it really dawned on me like, wow, these guys are really good. They're really good at what they're doing. And but still they're also still having such a good time. I would say that's so important, because I'm not a teacher, right? But I know enough that I know that when kids really are inspired to care and they're kind of brought in, and then they buy into what's going on, they do pay attention, and they really try hard to learn, and they don't just go through the motions, like I said, right? And they can really take a lot away from what's going on, or what they're participating in music, even though they're not going to go on and become the principal violinist at the Chicago Symphony. But they could do other things, and they will probably draw from that experience. And I have to say that this is really honestly what I saw when I first visited a school with ETM at the encouragement of Rob, another board member here. It was a concert for really young kids, and I think they were in like fourth or fifth grade or something like that. They were really quite young, and it was honestly a madhouse when I first walked in, because nothing had started yet. It was just tons of kids everywhere with their instruments and their parents. There were tons of parents there in this like sort of gymnasium auditorium, and I was thinking, okay, this is sort of what I expected. But and then when their principal of the school kind of called these kids to attention, they really kind of locked in. And then their teacher came out, and all the kids really sat up straight, and they had their eyes on her, and they played very short, basic pieces, right? Like kind of like the standards of excellence or whatever, the hot cross buns of songs. But they did it really well, and it was an orchestra, and they they did it with a lot of enthusiasm, and there was so much enthusiasm in the room from the other kids. Like it was like the fourth graders played while the third graders watched, or vice versa, or something like that. And it was really just amazing. And I was just blown away because I briefly taught a little bit. I know sort of what went into that, right? The 15 or 30-second piece that these kids played. I know how I have a sense of how much effort, right, that teacher put into that. And she was clearly someone that the kids were listening to, right? And that's when, honestly, when I knew that I wanted to be a part of this, because I know, right? I know what that's like. I know how hard it is. And they were really succeeding. And it was so much more than just, like I said, the 30-second piece. You could really, if you could really see all the work and energy and effort that's going into that. And it's not for nothing. It's not just a silly little song that these kids are learning. And I think that really speaks to like the mission of ETM and this notion, honestly, sadly, in this country, that it's like arts are kind of, they're not primary, right? They're not just seen as important. To which I, not putting myself out there as the be all end all, right, of success. I'm just a lawyer who works in finance, but I did not pay attention in math. I went through the motions in math, but I really bought into music, and that's really where I learned a lot of the lessons that I carried on into my career.
And now for a short break. This podcast is made possible by Education Through Music. ETM's mission is to positively impact student motivation, achievement, and self-confidence by partnering with under-resourced schools to integrate music education into the core curriculum. To find out more or to support ETM in its mission, go to etmonline.org. What are some of your most memorable musical experiences, and how have they helped to shape you into the successful professional you are today? I'm wondering how these experiences have sort of dovetailed with the things that you're doing on a daily basis.
There are a lot. There are so many. When I was thinking about this question, so of these memorable musical experiences, right? Performing in front of tens of thousands in the Rose Bowl with the Cadets. If I just think off the top of my head, playing Respighi's Pines of Rome alongside my trumpet teacher, right, with an orchestra, which I still think is one of the best pieces to play. If you're a trumpet player, any trumpet players out there listening, check it out. Performing to sold out audiences in Tokyo, on a floating stage in South Korea. These are all like high points, right? That I can specifically kind of go in my mind and remember from years ago. But I think, honestly, the answer to the question, it might be better taken in a slightly different direction, which is to say, like, my really memorable musical experiences are the time spent sort of getting to those moments,
Mm.
like the rehearsals, right? The hours and hours in a practice room, the reps, as they call them, the dog days of summer, as we used to call
Yeah.
them, in drum corps, where you'd rehearse 10, 12 hours in like Texas or Louisiana. But I really liked practicing. I really liked the process, right, of you know doing a riff slowly, adding tempo until you could really nail it, learning riffs even faster than you would ever need to be able to perform it, right? But you're training your body, right, to be able to think that playing it is at the right speed, right, is easier than than what you prepared for,
Mm.
right? And this sort of ongoing struggle, right, with like consistency. When we were in Blast, we would do the same show, right, 6, 7, 10 times a week, perhaps. But you were always sort of reaching for that perfect show, quote unquote, which is like the show with no missed notes, which is very, very, very difficult to do. But those are the sort of the things that I think I remember and I took away versus, the really amazing moments, of which there were definitely many, especially performing, that I had the good fortune to participate in. And I think that the carryover to my life as a lawyer in finance is obvious. I don't have a lot of specific memories of like taking law school exams, right? But I definitely remember
Ah, yeah.
hours and hours in the
The
law
preparation.
library.
Yeah.
I do, I have some very high moments as a lawyer, especially working on asylum cases and things like that. It's the preparation that goes into those things that I really feel like those lessons that you learned in music sort of carry over, right? The over preparation, especially as a lawyer, right? Because you're always right. You're always if you're going to go out, if you're going to go into an immigration court, right, with an asylum client, you need to be ready for all the questions that might come up, right? There's no surprises. That's I think one of the biggest sort of lessons that you kind of learn, right? Is that there should never be a surprise. You should always be prepared to answer any question.
A missed note in that situation is a very serious problem. So yeah, like the over preparation, preparing over tempo so that the tempo is comfortable on the day in the moment. I think that's the yeah. I hadn't thought of it that way, but I suppose most of law is done in the woodshed in preparation for a case.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the thousands and thousands of words that are written and deleted and argued over, within your team that never see the light of day, right? It's sort of similar to the hours and hours of practice, right? That no one ever gets to hear other than you.
Yeah.
Some other things, in hindsight, bringing your energy to the interactions that you have, right?
Mhm.
Like I said, we would do blast. We would perform that show, 5, 7, 10 times a week sometimes, and we did it for a year and a half. And so, there was definitely a grind there, right? But really, what I learned from those around me too, a lot of the veteran performers, was like they bring it every single time, and that is really hard.
Yeah.
Like consistency is so hard. But the thing is, you're doing it on a Sunday afternoon, and you did it twice yesterday. You're going to do it again this evening. But the people in the audience, right, are only seeing it right now, and they deserve really something really special. It was funny enough that I saw that show in high school. And on stage there were a number of performers that I ended up playing with in the show, and but that didn't occur to me until later in life. But it's interesting, and a lot of them kept playing the show long after I left the show. But it was really super inspiring, and they really killed it. And it was one of those moments that I had that I was like, oh man, like I'll never be able, if I could do something like that, that would just be, these guys are like superstars. And it's funny looking back too, because I remember it was at like a university hall in like Virginia Beach, Virginia, right? It wasn't Broadway, it wasn't LA, it was not Tokyo. But they still brought it, right? Even though it was sort of like not backwater, but like, this theater kind of in the middle of nowhere almost, but they really brought it for the audience. And I think that that is a lesson that I carried over as well, because I could be sitting here at work, or you could have this client do XYZ. Somebody's asking you for this. It's very easy for things to become kind of routine or like rote. But then you remind yourself, like, look, this person has reached out to you for help, and it's really important to them. It's not very important to you, honestly, but you should bring the energy and the attention that person deserves, right, to the whatever project it is you're working on. I think people really value that, and that is something that I try to carry over from those days as well. But imperfectly, because it is really hard in any walk of life to do it like that. And the people that really can do that are honestly unique and very, very good.
Yeah, and I'm hearing a common thread with what you were saying about your high school band director as well, who sort of made it okay to be nerdy about something to like really. I guess another way of thinking of that is like to like pursue something earnestly, which I think is something that definitely middle school kids, but also high school kids, I think, need to have modeled. Like you sort of get all of these messages from your peers that it's not cool to care about stuff, and to care about stuff too much. But earnestness is really what makes things happen, like drives excellence in a field, and makes good performances happen. Like you have to care about stuff to the point of being a little nerdy about it to do it well, and to really like give someone your full attention and that sort of thing. So I think that's such an important thing, and it's really cool. I think when students start to get nerdy about stuff because it means that they've encountered a thing that they think is worth their earnestness.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I saw. Like that's what I could sense, right, when I saw the concert in Queens. Not maybe perhaps not that the kids were this was their be all end all, right? But
Mm,
they definitely cared and they were bought in. And I know, right, from experience that the teacher that is sort of going through the motions maybe or signaling that you can kind of sleepwalk from A to B, it's not going to get that reaction from a fourth or a fifth grader, right? They are very sensitive, I think, to those things. Yeah,
yeah.
it was amazing, honestly, to see that. And in a broader sense too, I really think that the people that I've met at ETM that work there and that are running the place are like that as well. They bring a lot of enthusiasm.
What advice do you have for student musicians who are at a crossroads and considering pursuing excellence in another field, but wanting to keep music in their lives?
Definitely, I would say do not be afraid, right, of finding ways to keep music or keep performance art in your life, right? It is never true that you don't have time. Although there may be certain times, right, or periods in your life when you don't have time, but it's not always. And I would say, especially throughout schools, especially throughout college, it is definitely okay to seek out, right, multifaceted experiences. I actually did not major in music, right, at Virginia. In fact, a lot of the people that I played with, a lot of the really talented musicians were like engineers, pre med students, or whatever, right? But it is always good for your mind, in your spirit in ways that are just not they're not obvious. But I really think that if you succumb to kind of a one-dimensional routine in the sense that you think that you really need to drill down on this and or whatever it is, right, law school, med school, these things, you can get busy, but if you deny yourself music and performance art and these things, especially if it's already a part of your life, it will make things harder.
Mm,
And it's sometimes it can seem difficult to put aside time to do these things, but it's really important.
yeah.
And and of course always be forgiving with yourself. There are times, right, if in the first year of law school, which is notoriously difficult, it would have been hard for me to do something like that. I don't think I did anything except law school. But once things settle down, right, try to you know get back to it because you will never regret it. I never, there are definitely evenings where I'm like, oh God, I have tickets. I got tickets to this opera, and geez, it's been such a hard week, but I already got the tickets. But do I really need to go? I could just go home. If you drag yourself there, you're not going to regret it, and
Yeah.
it's going to be refreshing and sort of rejuvenating in ways that are really good. And college is, I think it's easy to fall into that trap too, where you really want to be focused on whatever it is you're doing, right? Your engineering classes, your core classes, or this and that. But you can put aside a little bit of time to do like a chamber ensemble or something once a week. You know, you don't need to study. You don't need to be a music major to do it. But it will pay off in a lot of ways.
Something that I was always struck by when I was in college was that if I had all of these different things that were different from each other, and I did all of them with the amount of effort it required to do them, somehow I ended up finding more time in the day. There's a sort of time alchemy that you can do if you balance all of these things out. Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice for anybody, not just a student, but particularly a student who's like start sort of trying to figure out how to get what they need out of their day and their academic schedule and that sort of thing.
Maybe I'll just follow on that point. by saying that even sort of just advice that I'm giving now that it's like, oh, it's good for you to keep doing music or to keep up with music or to continue to expose yourself to these musical experiences later on in your life just because it will be rejuvenating that. But it's like it also just speaks to really honestly that it's like the mission of ETM. And again, this like very misguided approach, I think, sometimes to education in the United States, which is that you can forego these things and you can just drill down on math, science without trying to round it out and unlock, people's sort of like their potential with other, in other ways. It's just, yeah, it just feels to me so destined to fail.
Mm.
And I'm not an expert, and I don't have right studies at the tips of my fingers to point to. I just sort of have my own experience when I'm talking about this. But I yeah, I really just I don't know where I would be without music. I just it's very hard to say because I don't remember ever really I just as a kid I just didn't have the passion. It was the right key to sort of unlock a lot of enthusiasm in me that you can draw on in other parts of your life. Looking back, it's like if I had said, "Man, I really am passionate about baseball, or maybe like hockey or something. Maybe I could become a professional athlete." I think that kids do that, and then that is also very good, and that um, you know, along the way, right? You learn the same lessons and stuff, right? You can be a collegiate athlete for sure, and then go on to be a doctor, right?
Yeah.
And many of the lessons that that person will have learned, well, they will have learned from sports. But sports can't be the only thing that's in addition to math and science, right? We have to invest in all the keys, right? So that kids can try them out and see which one sort of unlocks those doors to the enthusiasm and the passion that they can then draw on in whatever it is that they choose to do.
Everybody's got something. Like everybody's got something to do and somewhere to be. It's just a question of whether that is the thing that is sort of privileged over the other things in school, or wherever it is that the the grade is being assigned.
It could be track and field. It could be journalism, but it could also be, choir, or it could be puppetry. Who knows, right? But we really just have to, make that stuff available. I think that really gets to sort of the equity of it all, right? So,
Absolutely. Ben, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me and to share your experience and your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
thank you so much. This has been fantastic, a great conversation. And I thank you so much for doing this for ETM. It really is a great resource.